Hey folks, welcome to a brand new edition of Smart Money, your favorite weekend show. Today we talk about the different investments that you can or should make in order to meet all your life goals. Now we all have many goals, right? A dream wedding, our children's education, a stress-free retirement, and of course luxurious travel. But most often than not, we don't plan well for these goals. So today we're going to decipher the best mutual funds to invest into to achieve these life goals. Joining me now is Aarti Desikan, the Executive Director at Anand Rathi Private Wealth. Aarti, thank you so much for being with me on the show. I'm going to start off with, I think, what is the biggest goal that a lot of us have, age agnostic, which is foreign travel, right? Since that's a very common thing that everyone sort of looks forward to, but no one knows how to plan for this goal. So let's start with that. What are the mutual funds that I need to invest into in order to plan my foreign travels and be ready with this goal?
Thanks Sonia for having me here, and it's great to start with an objective that I think we are all looking forward to in a post-COVID period. When it comes to consumption objectives, it would always be good for us to have a few steps that we follow so that we have the adequate amount of funds when we really need it. So what are these steps, right? The first step is to define your objective, which in this case is funds required for foreign travel. The second step is really to define your timeline. Is it an expense or an objective that is a one-time objective or a recurring objective? So in the case of foreign travel again, it's probably something that we want to do every single year. So we need to plan for that. The third step is to look at what are the factors that affect this particular objective, right? So when you look at foreign travel, there are two factors. One is your seasonality inflation, and the other is your rupee depreciation. Now that we've understood all of this, our strategy in order to get funds for this particular objective is to look at a bunch of mutual funds, which involves one international equity fund to mitigate your rupee depreciation risk, one gold fund, one domestic equity fund, and two debt funds. Now, what are some of these funds that you can look at? We have a bunch of funds, including the Franklin India Feeder Fund, the HDFC Gold Fund, the ICICI Pru Focused Equity Fund, and on the debt side, you have the Axis Strategic Bond Fund and the HDFC Medium Term Debt Fund. And if you look at how these funds have done in the last 3 years, as a overall bunch, they have given you around 14% annualized returns, and on a 5-year basis, they've given you around 12%.
Okay, in fact, I just want to get that up for our viewers on the screen once again. So if you're planning a holiday abroad, these are the kind of funds that perhaps you can invest into if you look at it from a 3 and a 5-year perspective. I think the Franklin India Feeder US Opportunity Fund has done the best. So you're saying, Aarti, that rupee depreciation is one thing that you can sort of beat by investing into these funds, right? Anything else? I mean, is it necessary that you need to invest in debt funds, or can pure equity also work?
See, that really comes into depending on when this need is really going to come into play. So if your need for travel is going to be a recurring need, then it is good to have some amount of funds in debt so that in spite of the volatility in the market, those funds are always available to you and the objective doesn't suffer.
Okay, got that. So that's how you can plan your holiday. The next thing I want to discuss with you is building a home, because it is by far the most challenging life goal since it involves a large chunk of money, right? Not only large chunk of money, you need to time market risk, you need to have liquidity as well, and you need to beat real estate inflation. So what should the asset allocation strategy be here for a young individual who's perhaps planning to buy a home?
So, you've actually already named most of the factors that determine how one should really look at their strategy, which is the money needs to be available when you need it, which is liquidity. The second is market risk. You cannot afford volatility when you need to make this payment, and real estate inflation. So the way we look at it, Sonia, is that if you have a target return of around 10% with a 3 to 5 year timeline, you could put approximately 50% of your money in equity and 50% of your money in debt. So again, if you look at the funds that we're looking at, it's around 3 funds in equity and 3 funds in debt. So the equity funds are your Mirae Asset Large Cap Fund, your Canara Flexi Cap Fund, and your Kotak Equity Opportunities Fund on the equity side. And on the debt side, you can look at the Axis Strategic Bond Fund, HDFC Medium Term Debt Fund, and the ICICI Pru Banking and PSU Debt Fund. And as an overall basket, this basket has delivered approximately 12% annualized on a 3-year basis and around 11.75% annualized on a 5-year basis.
Okay, so this is if I'm collecting money for the down payment of a house, but if I take a home loan, what are the various schemes that will help me recover the interest on my home loan?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think recovering interest on a housing loan is very important, because when you take a home loan, as against most other objectives, this is a long-term decision that you're taking. And just to put this in number terms, Sonia, if I take a 50 lakh loan for 20 years with a 7% rate of interest, I end up paying almost 43 lakhs as just pure interest. And your EMI would be around 38,000 on a monthly basis. Now, the best way to recover this, or what we suggest, is if you could simultaneously invest a portion of your EMI. So let's say 18% of your 38,000, which is around 7,000 rupees, every single month into an SIP for the same 20 years, you would have a corpus of around 64 lakhs at the end of that and a profit of almost 47 lakhs. So what you would end up doing in that same time period is recovering all the interest that you paid towards this objective.
Okay, that's very interesting. So you're saying if there's a 50 lakh loan...
And, coming to what are the kind of...
Yes. Go ahead. What are the kind of funds you were finishing? What funds that one should invest into?
Right. So since it's a long-term investment, we've just suggested 3 pure play equity schemes that you can look at. So you have the UTI Master Share Fund, the HDFC Flexi Cap Fund, and the Kotak Blue Chip Fund. And all these funds have had a long tenure of being in the market with a good track record. And if you look at it over the last 3 years, they've given you an annualized return of around 13.24%. And on a 5-year basis, it's given you around 13.6%.
So this is what you're saying, is that a portion of your EMI that you need to invest into these funds in the form of an SIP so that you can sort of recover your interest on the home loan. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's how you can plan, buying a home and still not perhaps dipping into your savings in a big way. You can recover interest on your home loan as well. So that's 2 life goals that we spoke about, travel as well as building a home. Let's take a short break on that note, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll talk about some other life goals, and Aarti will tell us what are the best mutual funds that you need to invest wisely into so that you can achieve your dream goals. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Smart Money on CNBC TV 18, where we're talking about achieving our dream goals by investing wisely. We're with Aarti Desikan of Anand Rathi Private Wealth. Aarti, before the break, we were talking about life goals like luxurious travel as well as building a home. But now let's talk about retirement planning, because when it comes to retirement, most people prefer vehicles like Public Provident Fund or EPFs or even ULIPs. But if, say, I have another 10 years to my retirement, I would like to retire by 45 to 50, what should the split be between equity and debt, and what are the good retirement funds to look at?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sonia. Most people, tend to look at vehicles like an EPF and a PPF, but those don't necessarily always take care of the most important factor that affects, the kind of corpus that you require at retirement, which is inflation. So what we really suggest is to have a more holistic approach of investing into both equity and debt. And the thumb rule that we typically have is that if you have 10 years to retirement, that you could probably look at putting around 80% of your wealth in equity mutual funds and 20% in debt and debt equivalent vehicles such as your EPF or your PPF. So that is our thumb rule. If your period to retirement is 5 years, it's slightly different. If your period to retirement is 20 years, you can definitely afford to take a little bit more risk in how much you invest in equity. And since the debt portion is being taken care of by EPF or PPF, let me just tell you some of the funds that you can look at from a retirement perspective on the equity side. So again, we look at a basket of just 3 funds, 2 retirement funds and 1 pure play equity fund, which is a flexi cap fund. So the two retirement funds that you could look at is the HDFC Retirement Savings Equity Fund and the Tata Retirement Savings Progressive Fund. And on the pure equity side, you could look at the Canara Robeco Flexi Cap Fund. Now, these funds have done very well, and if you look at the last 3 years annualized return, it's around 15%, and on a 5-year basis, it's given you around 15.85%.
But of course, on a 3-year basis, if you look at it, these retirement funds have done very well. But if you map it on a 5-year basis, about the Tata Retirement Fund has given you what, 11%, and Canara Robeco about 16%. This is in line with what some of the large cap, the ICICI blue chips or Kotak blue chips of the world have given you. So what is the difference between, why should I invest in a retirement fund as opposed to just any regular large cap fund?
So again, the retirement funds, vis-a-vis a pure play equity fund, has the ability to go between debt and equity. So if you are in a period that is closer to your retirement, it is good to have a fund that is able to move between debt and equity and reduce the volatility for you, instead of just having a pure play equity fund or only equity funds in your portfolio.
Okay, got that. So you don't need to have pure play equity funds in your portfolio if you're looking for retirement. But this is when I'm planning my retirement, right? Aarti, post-retirement, if I want schemes which will give me a lucrative SWP or systematic withdrawal plan, something where I can get a monthly income so that I don't have to dip into my savings, what are the good plans for me?
Yeah, so once you get into that post-retirement phase, it's important to be slightly conservative because you depend on this money on a monthly basis and you cannot afford any risk. So if this money that you're investing is purely for consumption purposes, what we advise is to just look at a basket of pure play debt funds which have a systematic withdrawal plan option. And the kind of funds that you can look at is an Aditya Birla Sun Life Income Fund, an Axis Strategic Bond Fund, HDFC Medium Term Debt Fund, ICICI Pru Banking and a PSU Debt Fund, and the Kotak Dynamic Bond Fund. And again, to talk about the returns, in the last 3 years, this basket has given you around an 8.71% annualized, and on a 5-year basis, it's given you around a 7.6% annualized.
Okay, now I have a question here as well. I mean, if you look at the annualized returns, you don't really manage to beat inflation as much, but I guess this is what happens with regular debt and bond funds, as opposed to if I invest in a corporate fund, say Shriram Transport Fund, something that perhaps may give you higher returns. Is that a better option? I'm just trying to weigh the pros and cons here for post-retirement corpus.
Sure. So I think what we should keep in mind is that in your post-retirement period, the one thing you cannot afford is risk of any kind, which is why we don't suggest equity. So similarly, even on the debt side, we would prefer not to take any kind of either credit risk or interest rate risks that can really affect any payout that you require on a monthly basis. So we prefer to stick to a basket of funds that is 80% AAA and another 20% in GSEC or safer instruments, rather than look outside just to get that additional 0.5% or 1%.
Okay, so let's just revisit what we've learned with respect to retirement planning, right? There are two things. The first part is where should you invest your retirement corpus, and the second part is post-retirement, what happens. So the two graphs will come up for you once again, if we can just get them on your screen. There's a mix of debt and equity that you need to invest in for your retirement corpus. So if you're creating a retirement corpus, then these are the 3 to 5 year, no, that's the post-retirement corpus. So post-retirement, if you need a systematic withdrawal plan, then these are the funds that you can perhaps invest into. There's HDFC medium-term debt, which has, of course, given a good return of almost 8.5%. There's 9.5% on the Kotak Dynamic Bond Fund. So this is for a post-retirement corpus where you can get an annualized return, so a monthly income, so that you don't have to dip into your savings. If we can get the previous graph as well, the previous graph is if you're planning for your retirement, what do you do? Where do you invest your money? That's the retirement corpus that you need to create. With the 5-year horizon, if you look at it, it's not bad. I mean, 11 to about 16-17% returns on all these retirement funds is what Aarti is suggesting. So that's for retirement, right? But finally, children's education, which is probably the biggest chunk of a person's salary. is something that also troubles a lot of parents, right? So what are the funds then can help me minimize rupee depreciation risk on my investments? Because that is one thing when a child is sort of studying abroad, rupee depreciation is something that you need to sort of factor in. So if I want to minimize that risk, Aarti, how do I do it?
Yeah, as a parent, I completely agree, Sonia, that a large portion of our spending and our planning goes towards, children's education, and especially with kids studying outside, more today. I think the way one needs to plan this is to look at the two factors that affect, this particular expense, which is primarily inflation or the cost of increase in education, and the second, like you said, is rupee depreciation. So it's very simple. The kind of strategy that we look at is again a combination of one international equity fund, equity pure play funds, and a children's fund with a target rate of return of around 12%, which would take care of both the factors that I spoke about, which is inflation and rupee depreciation. So, coming to the schemes that one can look at, the first is the Franklin India US Opportunity Fund, which is again an international fund in order to mitigate your depreciation risk. The second is a Mirae Asset Large Cap Fund. And then there are two children funds that we recommend, which are the HDFC Children's Gift Fund and the SBI Magnum Children's Benefit Fund. This as a combination, we believe, is a good basket to look at for your children's education. And in terms of returns, the last 3 years, it has given you an annualized return of around 17.3%. And on a 5-year basis, it's given you an annualized return of around 17.5%.
Okay, so those are all the funds that you can perhaps invest into if you're looking to plan your child's future. And here it is, these are the kind of returns as well. There's an HDFC Children's Gift Fund, there is a Mirae Asset Large Cap Regular Growth Fund as well. But I think the question that would crop up next, Aarti, is that are there any specific advantages of investing particularly in a children's saving fund over traditional diversified funds? Any tax exemptions that I can avail of?
Sure. So I think what one must understand is that if you do invest into a children's fund, there is a lock-in for 5 years, and this can be extended till your child is old enough to pursue his academic goals or till he turns 18. From a taxation perspective, you do get the benefit of up to 1.5 lakhs under Section 80C if you do invest into these children funds. And the other advantage that one must keep in mind is that these funds again invest into both debt and equity. So they are definitely less volatile than just pure equity funds.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to understand a little more about children's education planning in terms of when is the right time to invest for your child. A lot of people believe that you should start investing immediately as the child is born, but what are the benefits of that? Is it too late if I invest, say, when the child is about 10, 11 years old? How should you sort of, plan it as per the child's age?
So, the way I see it, Sonia, is the earlier you invest, it is always better because you can then afford to take certain risks, especially if you're investing into equity, and therefore the whole concept of compounding comes into play. And this is definitely better, keeping in mind that you're looking at an objective that you don't want to compromise on, which is your children's education. But if you start it a little later, so if you start it 3 or 4 years before the child really requires it, you would need to do two things. One is invest larger sums for the same objective, and two, probably you would need to invest some amount, at least in debt or debt equivalent schemes, because you cannot afford to take that risk when the objective comes up. So I think starting early is always something that's recommended, whether it's children's education or it's retirement or it's any other consumption goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. You wound up on a very wise note saying that it's never too early to start investing for your future. So let's just sort of rewind all the different opportunities or different mutual funds that you can perhaps invest into to meet your life goals. We start first with planning a holiday abroad, and as you can see on your screen, there are plenty of funds. There's a Franklin India Feeder US Opportunity Fund, which has done exceptionally well in a 3 and 5 year period. There's the HDFC Gold Fund, ICICI Pro Focused Equity Fund. Next up, you have, if you're sort of planning to build a home, then you're collecting your house down payment. These are the different kind of funds that you can perhaps invest into. They are your usual funds, the Kotak Equity Opportunities, Mirae Asset Large Cap, and the returns have been pretty solid as well. Then you have, of course, you're recovering your interest on home loan, which is very important. A part of your EMI needs to go into SIPs, into mutual funds, so that you can sort of recover your interest on home loan over the time period of your home loan, which is 10 or 20 years. And these are the different kinds of mutual funds you can invest into. Then you have retirement planning. There are specific retirement funds. There's the HDFC Retirement Savings Equity, Tata Retirement Savings Progressive Fund, and Canara Robeco as well. And finally, a post-retirement, creating a post-retirement corpus as well, where you get a monthly income. So there are a couple of debt funds that Anand Rathi has recommended. And of course, we wind it down with a children's fund and how you can secure your child's future. Aarti, thanks a lot for joining us on the show. It was really a pleasure speaking with you. Hope to chat again for many more times in the future. Thanks a lot for covering this topic with us. Well, with that, it is a wrap on another edition of Smart Money. Thanks so much for watching. Keep writing to us, giving us your feedback, and see you again same time, same place next week. Till then, stay safe.